Hi, I'm an Australian living here in Belarus, and you cannot imagine how many times I've been asked, why the bloody hell are you living in Belarus? So I want to share my story with you, given that people have some interest in this. The story starts back in 2018, and at this point I was living in Melbourne, Australia, my hometown where I'd grown up, spent most of my life. I'd had 2 years living in the States in total, in two different cities and situations, and seen a lot of countries as you do as an Australian. So I was pretty comfortable with the world around me, but quite settled in Melbourne, quite happy in Melbourne. Had a good solid job as an economics lecturer, had a lot of social networks, hobbies, and easy for me to meet and date girls. Everything was kind of cool, right? Now I came back from my European holiday. So during the Australian winter, Southern Hemisphere, it's obviously in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summer. So I would take my holiday usually in that little break between semester 1 and 2 in Australia. So I came back and I'm like, that was fun. You know what? I know it's just a holiday and of course it's supposed to be fun. But you know what? I reckon I want to live there. I reckon it's more fun living there. I reckon I have a better life living there than living here. It's like, let me explore this thought. Because again, it's a holiday. You're supposed to enjoy it. It's not reality. I'm like, this feeling's pretty persistent. So I'm looking at myself and I'm like, okay, my life's good. Everything's cool. But the elephant in the room, and the reason why I was staying in Melbourne for the last few years, the elephant in the room is the lack of children. I have not reproduced. I have not sent my seeds off to productive fertilization. So because of this, I was sticking around in Melbourne, waiting for that to kind of happen, and it was starting to become obvious that this might not happen. Yeah. So it's like, okay. So if on the odd chance that I do not have children, which I think is quite sad for anybody, really, I think that process is very important in terms of the holistic view on your life. So if I don't have children, why am I in Melbourne? Why? It's insanity. Like, get out immediately, right? It's like, okay, well, that's easy. But what happens if I do want to have children? It's like, well, Australia's a good place. Like, traditionally, I'm so lucky to be born there, right? Really, so lucky. Even though my childhood was not fantastic, blah, 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 but it's okay because I was born in Australia, right? I'll work it out. It's okay. So I feel very blessed in this respect. Now, at this point, I'm like, okay, if I have children, should I stay in Australia? And I'm just kind of picturing my life because I'm looking, obviously, a fairly high divorce rate. And, men, when they get divorced in a country like Australia, don't end up with much, right? Like, typically the woman gets the house. If the wife or ex-wife is very reasonable, you might have even joint custody, can happen from time to time. But just as often, you can be denied custody as well, right? So you kind of have this weird, biased legal system. And I'd seen enough mates get positively screwed during this process, right? And I'm like, gee, that's pretty rough. It's okay. Well, what happens if you stay together? Because, it's still 40% divorced, means 60% not divorced. And if I kind of pick well and have my stuff together, then hopefully it should work out pretty well, right? It's not an unreasonable assumption to make. However, when I'm looking at my friends and their marriages and their parents, their cousins, all these kind of social networks that I have, and gee, there aren't many good marriages. Like, I'm not talking the first year or two, right? I'm talking like in the guts of it, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever. This doesn't look like much fun. And now, of course, I know parenthood is responsibility and on some level selflessness. I do understand this, but the dynamic between the wife and the husband always seems to be pretty horrible. Nagging, whinging, bitterness, resentment, controlling. It's actually horrible. And I'm looking forward to a life there. And I'm thinking, you know what? I don't like my odds. And I'm an odds man, right? I'm a statistics man. That's how I think. I like probabilities and I want to put the odds in my favor. So I'm like, this is, again, it can work out. It can actually work out. But I don't know. I reckon I might be better off somewhere else. So in my style, once I make a decision, I make it reasonably quickly and then commit to it. So I committed to this back in 2018, and I worked it out, and I said, okay, based on the amount of money I earn, the amount of money I want, blah, 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 I'm giving myself till just before semester 1, 2020. So I'm going to work until the end of February 2020. I'm going to resign so I don't have to start another teaching year. I'm going to give myself like a few months there of the financial year so I can get some tax back. And it's like, this should all fit pretty well. Yeah. So that's what I did. I got a second job. So I would actually nick off from my job on a Wednesday morning and put a suit on, and I taught at some postgraduate stuff at a business school in Melbourne. And then I got an online job at an online university. So I was working 3 jobs. I don't know how many hours in total, maybe 60 or 70. Plus starting some online businesses. Because of course, if you come to Belarus, you can't just get a job, right? You need to be organized. So I'm like, okay, a year and a half is enough time for me to get that together. Everything went well. It was a tough year and a half. I worked hard, you know, saving, sacrificing. You know, every dollar I went to spend, I'm like, don't spend it, because in Thailand or in Portugal or Georgia, it's going to go a lot further. So try to deprive yourself as much as possible. This is my mentality. That's what I did. So I stuck it out, and then I had booked a trip to taste test 6 different countries with a view to living in one long term. And those countries were, let me think, they were 3 in Asia, 3 in Europe. And the 3 in Asia were Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. And the 3 in Europe were Georgia, Ukraine, and Russia. Right, so they're the 6 that I had kind of picked out. Given the time of year, I'll start in Asia first. And a buddy of mine, by the way, wanted to come. So for a couple of months anyway. I think maybe the first 2 countries. So I'm like, cool, my mate can come. That'll make things a bit more fun. Away we go. So February something, I forget, late February 2020, I took off. Now at that time, there was this little thing called COVID just starting, right? And it's like, okay, there was a few things, you know, borders shutting, whatever. I'm like, don't worry about it. I don't care, right? I don't care. I'm going to Thailand, and I did. And things were cool there for a couple of weeks. Me and my mate were having a good time. You know, just digital nomad life in the pool during the day with the laptop there, and, you know, living a good life and good balanced life. So it was fun. And then about the 2nd or 3rd week, we noticed more people were kind of staying at home. Because, you know, like as a continent, Asians are probably more cautious about health things than most other continents. So they were kind of staying at home a lot more. More masks were showing up. Just catching the overhead, is it the BTS, the overhead there through Bangkok. You just notice that there's not many people out and about anymore. So we're getting kind of into the 4th week there, and we're like, geez, mate, this is a bit rough. What do you reckon we should do? And both me and my friend were like, well, we don't want to go back. We don't want to torpedo our grand plans, right? So let's see it out. So next stop, Indonesia. However, Indonesia just shut its border. That's a problem, getting in there, obviously. It's like, okay, well, Philippines was the next one. Let's go to Philippines. Philippines also shut its border. Well, that's pretty effed. It's like, well, let's just stay here. It's Thailand, there's lots of foreigners here. You know, she'll be right, mate, as the saying goes. So we extended our visa, and then things were getting pretty dire. Like, the vibe on the streets of Bangkok was pretty horrible. It was like some kind of apocalypse was going to happen. You know, that was a vibe of it, like this. And we're like, okay, the Australian government's blah, blah, blah. We're going to shut the borders soon. You can't go back in. And also one thing too was around that time you had to wear a mask to get in anywhere. So we're trying to buy some masks, and no shops would sell us any masks because we're not Thai. So they wouldn't sell to the Falang or foreigners, right? It's like, oh, gee, that's a bit rough. Understandable. You got to prioritise your own people's welfare. I get that. But we're like, geez, what happens if this little cough thing of COVID kind of got a bit serious and one of us had to go to hospital, but there's no hospital bed for us because we're deprioritised because we're not locals. And it was that we're like, all right, let's just go home for a few months. My mate still had his apartment there, empty, so we could both move into there. And all right, so we went back a year and a half later, right? A really pretty miserable year and a half, although it was actually okay because we ended up setting up a house with 3 mates, and then because the rents in the city centre dropped so much, like they did in many other countries. Several other mates from the suburbs moved to the city centre as well, so it's kind of fun actually in a way. Although I'm like, I don't want to be here, I'm a prisoner in my own country. And can you imagine, this is very personal, I'm actually still having nightmares about this. I'm having nightmares that I'm back living with my mates and stuck in Australia and I don't know how to get out. Can you imagine that? That's how much I've actually been traumatized. It's pretty serious shit. So anyway, that aside, we had the year and a half, I had the year and a half at home, and you can't leave. The borders are shut, right? You can't leave, like literally locked in our country. And some of these rules we're having, like you had to be home at 9 o'clock, you couldn't go more than 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers from your house. Just any random stuff they're just making up, right? With nothing really supporting any of it in terms of being useful. Mask mandates, blah, blah, blah. Can only go into the shops once a week and just crazy stuff, right? And it's like, life's pretty miserable when that's happening. Now, of course, you can be flexible with the rules and my mates and I were very flexible with those too, but at the same time, you're always, under pressure to just sit at home for a year and a half. What the hell is this, right? So the word got out kind of the middle of 2021 that Australia was going to open up again. And it's got me very excited, right? But it was really hard to get out. So I was talking to friends that were trying to get out. How'd you go? What happened? And everyone's getting rejected because you have to apply to the government. So I look on the government website, right, what do I have to do to get out of here? And it looks like the sentiment of it is you just have to be stable overseas. And it's like, okay, I was already living overseas. I have an asset base, I have an income online. What else? They want you to be vaccinated. I'm like, I don't know about that. These vaccines have not been around for very long. I mean, overall, vaccines are very good, right? I mean, just the amount of lives that have been saved around the world over the decades of some wonderful vaccines. But these things are new. They're being pushed on us very aggressively. They're using this kind of untested technology. They're not even letting us see the test results, these Pfizer test results. But I'm like, look, if I don't take the vaccine, I can't get out. So I took it. I took 2 Pfizer shots. And then the other thing was you needed to have proof that you're going to be permanent in a country somewhere. And the easiest way for me to do that was to have a visa, a student visa, right? Now, I'm fully armed in terms of education, right? I can't get any more. It's not possible. So it's like, all right, well, let's learn a language, go to a language school, get a student visa through a language school. And what language will I learn? And it's like, well, the only one I know it's kind of meaningful at all is Russian and Indonesian. But of course, Asia was shut at that stage. Asia was even more extreme than Australia for the most part, right? So it's like, okay, it's got to be in Europe. We're going to Europe. Where do I want to go? All right, Georgia. Georgia's great. Great reputation. Everyone loves it. Everyone speaks highly of it. It's very cheap. It's fairly open at that point. Great hub for digital nomads, which is, I guess, kind of what I was or what I am. Let's do that. The only problem with Georgia is there's no real language schools there, and none that will give you a visa for Russian language because it's kind of like this older language, right? So there it's kind of English schools or Georgian language schools. And like, I couldn't imagine a bigger waste of time than learning Georgian. No offense, anyone who knows Georgian, but I just don't see it as a very useful way to spend my time. Whereas at least Russian is still used in many, many countries. So I'm like, okay, maybe Georgia's out then. And also with Georgia, you don't even need a visa, right? It's got that wonderful 1-year visa-free thing going on. So that doesn't help me. It's like, well, where else do I go? Well, okay, let's head north. Let's head to Ukraine, Russia, and there's this country called Belarus, which is on the news because their football teams played throughout the league, right? They're the only football league running in the whole of the world was the Belarusian football league, right? So I was like, that's interesting. Well, it's kind of nestled in there between like Russia, Ukraine, Poland, the Baltics. I know all these countries. I've pretty much been to all of them. Belarus has to be kind of the same. So Belarus got on the radar. So at this point, I'm like, okay, let's go Ukraine, Russia, or Belarus, right? I'm like, I'm feeling Ukraine the most. Out of these 3, this is the one I'm the most familiar with. And I know Kiev, and even though there was some restrictions there, as there was still in Russia, I know that in these countries you can just pay a little bit and the problems go away, So it's like, I'm all up for paying a bit and the problem's going away. I can really handle that. So I was like, cool. So I started contacting language schools in Kiev. And it seems that only one of them is able to give me the visa that I needed. So I'm emailing the guy. I'm like, hallelujah, brother. I'm on my way, right? And the guy's like, oh, here's my MoneyGram. Just plonk the fees in there, 5,000 euros. I'm like, 5,000 euros sounds like a lot. What exactly am I getting for this? What are the expectations? When do the classes run? Are there exams? It's the normal freaking questions you would ask, right? No information forthcoming. Just pay the fees, and when you get here, we'll sort it out. And it's like, you know, this part of the world, trusting people is not the first option, right? Especially when you just handed over 5,000 euros. So I know this guy is just trying to scam me. And I tried to get around this, and he was so freaking stubborn. I'm just like, you know what? Screw you, buddy. If this is how things are going to work here, I can't even get the visa without getting scammed. It's like, okay, let's just put this country to the side. Next choice was Russia. Now, of course, remember, this is well before anything in 2022 had happened, right? Or any inkling of this stuff, right? So next stop was Russia. Next option was Russia. I thought, all right, Moscow is it. Moscow is a very international, cosmopolitan kind of city, you know? It's not even really Russia. It's kind of like a mix of the whole region. So it's like, all right, this sounds really cool. I could do Moscow. Bit pricey, but you know what? I reckon this would be an awesome experience. So I get a hold of their linguistic university and I email them. And they're like, yeah, cool, you can come along. But we take 3 months to send you a letter of invitation. Okay. So let's just get the head wrapped around that. 3 months to send me a letter, right, template with my name plastered on there. The person emailing me can do this in 30 seconds. They're doing no background checks on me. There's no check of my language competency. There's no check of my resume. There's no check of anything. It's just a generic letter given. And it's going to take 3 months. I'm like, look, I know I have to be patient with bureaucracy in this part of the world, and Russia's is notoriously bad, right? Way worse than probably Ukraine and definitely Belarus. So I'm like, okay, this is a problem, because you know what? This invitation is not even the visa yet. This is an invitation to commence the visa process. I'm like, I'm going to be friggin' dead soon, right? All right, let's try this little country called Belarus, yeah? And I was kind of keen on Belarus for one reason, because I had a buddy, or kind of a friend of a friend, who'd already gone through the linguistic university pathway, and it worked. The university was there, the fees were paid, the place was there was a teacher, everything happened, and they said to me that there's only a 3-week wait for the invitation letter. And under normal circumstances, I'd be 3 weeks waiting for what? Just print it out now and send it to me. What is this, right? But under the circumstances of investigating the other two countries, all of a sudden this 3-week thing seemed like a pretty good deal. So I said, cool, I want in. I want to come to Belarus. I want to come to Minsk, right? This country I've never heard of, never been to. I'm coming, yep. So 3 weeks goes on. 3 weeks goes on. And I'm pretty toey, yeah? I'm at home. I'm living in my tracksuit pants. I hadn't had a haircut for a year or something. The hairdressers were all closed. Just stopped shaving, just stopped living, right? And so 3 weeks later, I email them, hey, what's up with the invitation letter? It's like, oh yeah, we're just processing it. And I could tell from the email they hadn't even started yet. All right, sure, I'll wait for it. So then 3 weeks later, check in again, here's the invitation letter, and things went fairly smoothly from there. And that's it. And I got here and I didn't really know what to expect. And to be honest, I had my student visa. I had a contract for 5 months. Yep. And I paid the 5 months fees. And my intention was not to even study. Yeah. As long as it was okay not to study, I could get away with it, which I figured you probably could in this region. And turns out, yep, you can get away with not studying, no problems. But then I kind of got into it. Yeah, and I kind of got into it and I kind of got comfortable here. And I'm like, the rest of the world, so 5 months went on, it was like February or whatever. So I came here in September. It was now maybe January, February. And I'm like, I want to go back to Asia it's fine here. The winter's fine. I can handle it. It's fine. But I want to go back to Asia, but it's all still shut. Right? And that's kind of the problem I face now. Belarus is really nice. I mean, you can see this is a typical commie Soviet kind of park. Belarus is really nice. It's a great place to live. Everything functions pretty well for the most part. But, time to move on and with my life objectives. But now we've got another strain of COVID. So Philippines is having problems. Indonesia's changing its requirements. Oh my goodness. And then you got monkeypox. Who knows what the powers to be want to do with this thing. And it's like, oh man, what am I even going to do? So I'm still here. And I was going to leave at the end of August, but I'm still here. And it just makes more sense to stay here where I can at least have a sense of mobility and basic freedoms day to day without having to go through the rigmaroles of constant testing and blah, 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 blah. So that's it. That's how I got to Belarus. It was my choice number 47 or something like this, right? It wasn't really on the radar. But yeah, pleasantly surprised. It's one thing I really appreciate about it is because it's been so closed off, it really has its own sense of, how would you say, like identity, its own sense of civilization. It's its own society. And I kind of like this. Of course, it's influenced by America, everywhere is, but it's still got this kind of sense of togetherness, which I really, really like. And it helps the society function really, really well, which is very, very appealing. But anyway, there's my story. I'm not sure how long that went for because I broke up the videos a bit. It's probably 20 minutes plus. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Let me know your story if you're living here. Tell me how you got here. Why did you choose here? Was it deliberate, accidental? I'd love to hear about it. And of course, once you're here, you can't help but notice the women, right? When I got off the plane in September, there was this other Aussie guy there. He may be watching this. Hello if you are. And he's still here as well. He went and came back. And we're on the bus there, and we're like, did you notice the girls? And he's like, yeah, I did. They look pretty good, don't they? Right? And it turns out they are pretty good. And I've seen a lot since I've been here in the way of Western men getting married and living here. And I think this is a pretty good option. Maybe not the option for me, but overall, this is a pretty good freaking option. So I've started coaching guys here. I've started doing consultations with guys. Started off informally, not with the goal of even doing it, but now it's just kind of grown, and now I'm linking it to this channel. So marriedinminsk.com if you want more information about how to assimilate here, because this is a different culture. If you go to anywhere that's in the EU, whatever, Czech, Poland, Romania, even Ukraine, and even Russia to an extent, there's some level of westernization in the way that the dating and courting process goes. Whereas here in Minsk, here in Belarus, there kind of isn't. There isn't. The process is different. The culture is different. It's really been sheltered and hidden away. And this makes things very complicated. And what I see is when Western men come here, they get some idea, hey, there's lots of beautiful women here, I want to go there. And they come here, and people are very friendly here. They're very nice, they're very friendly. And they might come here for, say, a week, just to check it out and see what it's like, right? So they come here for a week, and they're excited, yeah? So they come back for 6 months, 12 months. And then something happens. They realize that all that friendliness actually kind of meant nothing, and they're trying to force the girls down this Western dating model, which A, is terrible, and B, is totally unsuited to the culture here. So what keeps happening is that a high proportion of the men, not all of them, some work it out, some stay, but a high proportion of the men get frustrated, hate on the local girls, and leave. It's really interesting to see. And it's because of this cultural misunderstanding and mismatch. Now, the problem is that if a guy tries to flex a bit to this Belarusian model of dating and courting and getting to know people, what tends to happen is he starts getting scammed, because there's a very small percentage of Belarusian girls, and it is a small percentage, although it feels like the whole country sometimes if you're a Western guy, but it is a small percentage, have figured out that they can really milk foreign men for a lot of stuff. So you got this kind of weird tension But unfortunately for most foreign men here, they never meet normal Belarusian girls. So again, this is why I'm providing the service I am. I'm helping guys out to meet normal girls and to help them understand better understand how things work here in terms of getting to know women and then potentially marrying them and having a family here. So do check out marriedinminsk.com if you want to see a little bit more about how I might be able to help you.